Chapter 10. Estella. I was overjoyed that I was going to see Estella soon, and my spirits were high and flowing. I went about laughing, singing, and generally pleased with everything life had to offer. I realized that although the feeling might be wonderful for me, Herbert might find this continuous display of cheerfulness rather exhausting. I apologized to him and confessed that I was madly in love with Estella. Yes, I know, Herbert said in a matter of fact way, without being surprised at all. How on earth do you know? I stammered. It's been written all over you ever since you told me about your childhood visits to Miss Havensham's house, he replied. It was both comforting and a delight to reveal my true feelings about Estella, how I admired her beauty, about being unworthy of her love, and my hope of marrying her in future. Surely Miss Havisham desired that I should marry Estella. I confided in Herbert. Why on earth would she make a gentleman out of me otherwise and settle a fortune on me? Herbert consented to my theory, saying that he, like all Miss Havisham's relatives, thought so too. And then a serious look crossed his face and he said, Now, Pip, I am going to talk about something which might not agree with you. But first, I want to inform you that I am in love too. Her name is Clara Barley, and I want the two of you to meet. I am mentioning her now so that you realize that I harbored so hopes of marrying Estella myself. Although a thought like that had never crossed my mind ever, I let Herbert continue. When Jaggers put down the conditions of your great expectations, there was no mention of a requirement to marry Estella, was there? He asked. I shook my head in the negative. Then you are not bound to marry her, and I strongly advise you to detach yourself from loving her, Herbert advised. I was totally confused. But why, Herbert? I think about her upbringing. Think about how Miss Havisham has manipulated her feelings, thoughts, and actions. Think how cold and vain Estella is. So much like Miss Havisham, Herbert reasoned. I turned away from Herbert. I can never detach myself from Estella, I cried. I love her. I was touched by Herbert's worry for my well-being, but his words about Estella's character unsettled me and lingered on my mind for a long time. It was around this period that I turned 21 and was given the liberty of managing my money independently by Mr. Jaggers. He had permitted me to go into debt for a little extent, but I had made up my mind now to live on my grand income amounting to £500 a year. The same amount had been gifted to me on my birthday by my mysterious benefactor. I used half of that amount in secrecy and with Mr. Wemmick's assistance to purchase a position for Herbert in a newly established shipping business. A young man called Clarica, who was both clever and honest, owned this firm, and he was in need of extra money and intelligent people. I made a contract to make further payments with the objective that Herbert would become a full partner in time. When Herbert informed me of a chance of meeting with Clarica and the offer of a position by him, his delighted face was rewarded enough for me. Herbert had no need to know who his benefactor was, and he became happier at his new job with each passing day. In the meanwhile, Estella had become an immediate success in London and was basking in her newfound glory. Miss Havisham had made arrangements for her to live with a widow with a daughter about Estella's age. This was a distinguished family that had good societal connection. As a result, Estella kept on calling on me all the time to accompany her for her shopping, parties, and balls. That should have made me happy, but I was not. I was treated like her step brother or a secretary. Although my positions by her side was envied by her numerous admirers, she granted me no special favors. One evening she said to me, "Pip, oh, Pip, will you never heed the warnings about me?" "Do you mean being warned about being attracted to you, Estella?" I asked. "You are blind if you don't know what I mean, Pip," was the remark she made. Love is blind is what I should have said, but I had always experienced hesitation when it came to pressing my love on her, as I was well aware that she would eventually obey Miss Havisham. I did not wish to impose a burden on her, and so I was unhappy. In the same breath, Estella ordered me to escort her to see the old lady who wanted to see her but hated it if she travelled alone. After she and we had had our dinner and we were seated by the fire, Miss Havisham's eyes were fixed on Estella. She was dying to hear about Estella's triumph from her own mouth, and her eagerness was almost witch-like. Estella did not write to her on a regular basis, and Miss Havisham was well aware of the names of the rejected suitors. I witnessed Miss Havisham's eyes shining with evil pleasure and in eager anticipation of the news from Estella. I realized that this was the old lady's revenge on men. It was also ultimate revenge on man who had abandoned her on their wedding day. She grabbed Estella's hand in her eagerness, and Estella pulled it away, giving the old lady a taste of her own medicine. The old lady was very hurt and exclaimed, "Estella, you are tired of me now?" "I am only tired of myself," Estella replied, with a great calm and composure. "You are made of stone, you old heart!" Miss Havisham screeched and waved her stick about. "It is you who had trained me to behave like this," Estella remarked. "But not me," Miss Havisham protested. "Only to them you must love me just as I love you." Estella shook her head. "I owe you everything by adoption, Mother. I shall do anything you ask me to do, but I cannot do the impossible. You taught me to be cold and hard as a stone. I have done that. You taught me not to love. I have done that too. I have learnt all your lessons well." I could not bring myself to watch the scene any further. I escaped to the garden, leaving the two women there. But there was no respite there as well, as the moans and pleading of Miss Havisham still reached my ears. Chapter 11. My Secret Benefactor. Time went by after my 21st birthday, but I was incapable of maintaining the resolve I made of then. To ensure that I was out of debt and to manage on the £500 granted to me by my benefactor. Besides owing Clarica the money for the completion of the contract I had made on Herbert's behalf, I also owed money to my wine merchant, tailor, jeweler, and others. I dreamt that each birthday of mine would ensure the transfer of large amounts of money by my secret benefactor. This would enable me to clear all my debts instantly. After that, I would live splendidly. I was 23 years old now, and I laughed with contempt at the gullible 21-old Pip who had once thought that £500 a year was a grand fortune. I was no more the Pip who had the notion that being a blacksmith in Kent was the most sought after profession in the world. I did not have a tutor any more, but I did read for many hours regularly. I was at home reading one particular night as Herbert was away on a business trip and the weather was rather stormy to venture outdoors. My concentration was disturbed by the loud chimes of the clock at St. Paul's Cathedral striking 11. Footsteps on the stairs added to the disturbance. The lamps on the staircase had been extinguished by the wind, so I carried my reading lamp to the door. The footsteps ceased and my light flashed into the entry path. "Who's there? What do you want?" I called out down the staircase. "I am looking for Mr. Pip," came the voice of a man who emerged into the light up the stairs. The stranger's face lit up when he saw me. His clothes were rough but in good condition, and he had long iron grey hair. He was about 60, although he possessed a large muscular body. He came closer and offered me his sunburned hands. I could not comprehend anything in that gesture of his and said, "Yes, I am Pip. What is it? What business do you have with me?" My business, yes, I'll explain." The man paused and I realized that he was expecting to be invited in. I did so hastily as I could not fathom why he was so happy and expected me to be as well. He surveyed the parlour with a smile of self-satisfaction and held out his hands towards me again. I thought he might be mad and backed away. I understand. It's not your fault after all," he said. "But I must say it's a disappointing reception after I travelled so far, and because I really looked forward to this meeting with you." The man discarded his coat and hat and made himself comfortable on a chair by the fire. He warmed his hands over the flames and looked over his shoulders towards me. "Anyone around?" "Who are you to ask me that?" I asked angrily. "A stranger coming into my rooms at this time of the night? What right do you have?" He shook his head and smiled fondly. "A brave one," he exclaimed. "I'm glad you have grown up to be a brave one." Suddenly, like a flash of lightning, the stranger's identity was revealed to me. This man was my convict from the churchyard in the marshes of Kent. He saw that I had recognized him and came closer with his hands outstretched. I put out my hands, half realizing what I was doing, and he grabbed hold of them with great emotion and kissed them. "You behave nobly, my dear boy. I have never forgot that noble Pip," he said, and was about to embrace me when I pushed him away with a hand on his chest. "If you have come to thank me, it's not needed. I helped you as a child. I hope your appreciation has changed your way of life to a reformed one. But I cannot offer you any sort of protection now," I said firmly. He backed away and looked around, and his eyes rested on the row of bottles on a sideboard. I spoke instantly. But maybe you will have a drink to warm and you up before you leave. Ah, yeah, whiskey, he replied, sitting down again. I served us both and said, how have you been living all these years? I have done wonderful well in South Wales. I am sheep farmer there, he explained. Can I be bold as to ask you how you have done since I saw you last shivering on those marshes? I told him my story unwillingly. He said softly when I was through, may I guess your income? I would say it's £500 a year. Yes, steady look unnerved me, and his words soft through they were pierced me like a high-pitched scream, and I shook all over. I suppose a go-between has been taking care of all these arrangements. Would the first initial of that person's name be J? He inquired. I grabbed the table for support as I was speechless and almost choking, but he did not stop. Doesn't that person go by the name Jaggers? Isn't it a fact that his clerk's name is Wemmick? He asked. My head was going around in circles now, and I had to grope my way to the sofa where I collapsed in the comfort of the cushion. He aided me to sit up straight and fell on one knee before me. Yes, Pip, my dear boy, it is I who has done it. I have made a gentleman out of you, he exclaimed. I made an oath that very cent I earned should go to you. I lived rough when I began to earn pounds so that you could live smooth. I moved away from him as if he were some kind of a sinister beast. In fact, I was terrified of him. You are more to me than a real son could ever be, Pip. There were many lonely nights when I herded my sheep, and as I sat my lonely meal, your face would appear to me. I'd say to myself, here's the boy again, a good looking at me while I eat and drink just like on the marshes. I would swear again to make gentlemen out of you, and that put life back in me at once. And I have done it. He happily surveyed the oriental rug, my elegant clothes, the paintings that adorned the walls, the books, and the ruby ring on my finger. I still found myself incapable of speech, but he carried on. I am famous for having pulled myself up in New South Wales. They do point me out behind my back for the convict I have been, but only I knew that I owned a gentleman, which none of them knew. It kept me going that someday I would return to see my boy and make myself known to him, he stated. In his sense of victory and elation, he had not noticed how I shrank from his touch and with what sadness I received his revelations. Where will I sleep, dear boy? He finally said. I've had a long journey which was also dangerous. You can have my roommate's bed. He's away. I found my voice again. But what do you mean by dangerous? The authorities will hang me if they find me back in London, he stated simply. I closed all the curtains and led him to Herbert's room, sick at heart that he had risked his life to see me. I also say sick at heart because I did not feel any compassion for him. I left him alone for the night, but not before asking, "Was there anyone else but you?" "No, dear Pip, only me," he said in a surprised manner. My dream of Estella was shattering with the convict's revelation. Miss Havisham had then not singled me out as a preferred choice of Estella's husband. Miss Havisham was not my benefactor after all. I was just Estella's convenient escort, a playing to be used with cruelty just like the old lady had taught her to do. I could not sleep that night. I just sat staring into the dying embers of the fire till the crack of dawn, a dawn which seemed to be more miserable than I had ever felt before.